Welcome, friends. This is Hurricane Hub live on 13 News Now Plus. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tim Pandages. If you're joining us on 13 News Now Plus, hello to you. We also post a recording of this on YouTube, so if you're watching it there, hello to you as well. And in the comments, if you have any questions throughout this broadcast, feel free to type it on in, and we'll try to answer it in tomorrow's broadcast at 8 p.m. We're here Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. for Hurricane Hub Live. So tonight on HHL, we've got a packed show for you. Lots to talk about. We've got Dexter that's in the North Atlantic. It's actually a bit stronger out there this evening than when we talked about it yesterday. Still a tropical storm, but it will begin to transition to what we call an extratropical cyclone, and that does change its characteristics a bit. We'll get into that in just a couple of minutes. Also new today, Colorado State University, they put out their seasonal outlook. They're usually the first to do so early in April, and they issue revisions throughout the season. They did one in early July. They did their second one today, so we'll dive into that, and if there's any changes on that outlook for the remainder of the season now that we're a third of the way through. And we've got a brand new invest out there tagged 96L, and this wave is currently located in the main development region of the Atlantic basin, and it may become our next named storm. Next name on the list is Erin. All right, let's mark our ascension here of the hurricane season. We're in August now, obviously, and we're starting to see a marked increase in activity in regard to climatology out there right now. Yeah, it's a little more active, certainly, than it was through most of July, but there's only one named storm out there right now. We may have our second one within the next 7 days. We'll start with Dexter. Notice where it's located, not anywhere near land, and it's not moving closer to land. Notice where it's plotted here as well. Almost all of its convection is completely dislocated off to the east and northeast, thanks to ongoing wind shear, which right now has been clocked at 40 knots. So very strong wind shear here, completely naked. It's kind of looking under the hood here. You can see the low-level circulation of Dexter and all of the convection well dislocated off to the east-northeast with strong westerly winds aloft, kind of tilting the whole system. And despite that, we're still seeing it getting a little bit stronger. Winds are up to 50 miles per hour now. Not a huge jump in intensification, but yesterday it was barely hanging on to tropical storm status, and it will begin a transition going post-tropical to extratropical. And basically what that means, it becomes a little more asymmetrical, loses its tropical characteristics. And with extratropical systems, we tend to find the strongest of the winds away from the center. With tropical systems, obviously, you get closer to that storm center, the stronger the winds. Not the case when we start to go post-tropical or extratropical. Here's the forecast track here. Again, notice it's got the tropical storm icon here, and then it loses it. It's going post-tropical to extratropical as it heads into the northern parts of the Atlantic. Again, nowhere near land here, even passing south of St. John's in Nova Scotia here. But notice the wind speeds do crank higher. Higher in tropical storm winds there, 70-mile-per-hour winds, and then kind of, plateauing and weakening here as it gets farther to the north and eventually just broadens out and becomes an open low, an open wave. All right, so what is an extratropical cyclone? I mentioned that. That's what Dexter will be transitioning to. Well, it's a low-pressure system, the exact definition here. A low-pressure system that typically occurs in the mid-latitudes like we're seeing, and characterized by a cold core and front. So it becomes a little more baroclinic, driven by temperature changes and fronts. And, of course, it becomes asymmetrical, as I said, with the strongest of the winds displaced from the center. All right, let's get to the next segment here, talking about the update from the Colorado State University in terms of their seasonal outlook. For comparison here, NOAA released their outlook at the end of May. That doesn't change. It's still 13 to 19 named storms. Colorado State University maintains their outlook. 16 named storms, 8 hurricanes, 3 majors, Category 3 or greater. For an average season, we look at usually 14 names, 7 hurricanes, 3 majors. And look where we are so far. We're a quarter of the way to the named storm outlook here that they have, and have 0 hurricanes and 0 majors so far in the season. Not that that's a bad thing. It's a good thing. But we'll see if we start to get much more active to achieve these numbers here that they maintained as of their release today from Colorado State University. Only 4 named storms: Andrea, Barry, Chantal, and currently Dexter out there, and maybe soon to be our 5th, which would be Erin, which is this cluster here. We'll get to that in just a second. I want to start a little closer to home, though, off the southeast coast of the United States. The same stalled out boundary that helped to give birth to Dexter is still hanging out off the southeast coast over some very warm sea surface temperatures. We've got the Gulf Stream here pumping in warmer waters from the south. And this is this cluster here that they have tagged. It's not an invest area, but it is an area of interest. But notice where it's expected to maybe develop here. This lobe has now been moved farther to the east and northeast away from the U.S. East Coast. Good news. Now, if it does develop, we're still likely going to see some indirect impacts, increasing rip current, higher surf, that sort of thing, out along the beaches of the Carolinas, up through Virginia and up through the Delmarva as well. But chances of it developing have actually gone down since yesterday. We were at 40% odds yesterday, have ticked down a bit within 7 days to 30%. Could it become Erin or Fernand, the next two names? Sure, it's a possibility, but it looks a little more likely that we see this wave that's been tagged Invest 96L achieve the tropical characteristics to get that name, which would be, again, Erin, whichever one gets there first, Erin or Fernand. Chances have gone up for development here. We are now at 30% within the short term over the next 48 hours, 60% now on the threshold of a high chance, 70% and upwards to be high within the next 7 days. Let's get a closer up look here on infrared satellite imagery of Invest 96L. It already has wind satellite estimated of 35 miles per hour, so we're not all that far off from achieving tropical storm force winds of 39 miles per hour. And overall, you can certainly see that there is a spin, there is organization here building, and that's why they did increase the chances of it possibly developing. And overall, favorable conditions for development. I mean, it's not ideal, but it's much more favorable than it was, say, 2-3 weeks ago. So a little bit more likely that we may see something develop out of this tropical wave that's out in the main development region. So quick refresher here. We haven't had an invest in a little while. So this is what that means. This is it decoded pretty much. Invest, short for an investigative area. It's just a way to kind of tag an area we want to monitor for tropical development. 96 is just a number. It's a category, like a record number. That's what I'm looking for. 90 to 99, and it just cycles on through. So this is 96. And then L is a basin indicator. It means it's in the Atlantic basin. If we were to show you Invest 96E, that would mean it's in the Eastern Pacific, or if it had a C there, it would be the Central Pacific. Let's look at, I mean, where it's located right now, okay? It's well to the southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands. Invest 96L marked by that orange X there. There's the Cabo Verde Islands. If this was to be a threat, I'm not saying it is, and I will show you the models here that kind of indicate it won't be a threat to the U.S., but we are still 10 to 12 days out from any potential impacts here to the United States. Okay, so we'll watch that. Now, I will preface that with another wave that's about to emerge off the coast of Africa that models are a little bit more bullish on, of that one being more of a low rider and moving on a track farther to the west, but that's still a long ways out. We'll talk about that. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. So now that it has been tagged as an Invest 96L, we're starting to get model data on it. So this is the first runs with it now tagged as Invest 96L. We don't have all the models yet. They have to run for a full cycle before they can populate. So we've got a few, but you can see the general trend here. There's almost two camps. There are a few that keep it a little bit stronger, that keep it farther to the south and west. And there are a few that are a little bit weaker that curve on out to sea. Now, the reason why it's going to likely do that is because we're going to have an area of high pressure here just off to the east, and another one here likely just to the west of Bermuda. So that's going to create a channel of weakness that's going to pull the system to the north and possibly threaten Bermuda. That can't be ruled out, and I'll show you one of the models that does show that. But it's possible that it even recurves out to the east of Bermuda here in the next 5 to 8 days. A lot of time to watch it. It could certainly change, but this is the early model runs on Invest 96L. Now let's turn to the GFS and the European, okay? Relative vorticity, we're tracking cyclonic rotation here, which would indicate the development of an area of low pressure. Here's what it looks like right now in the GFS, pretty much what we're looking at on there on infrared satellite imagery, right? We're getting some organization. We continue to see it. It starts to gain latitude. And there it is, curving and goes right, there's Bermuda right there. So it does threaten, at least on the GFS model, it does threaten Bermuda. Notice how I mentioned that secondary wave? There it is. Moving through the main development region 9 days from now. It'll change. Will it be in that exact location 9 days from now? Possible, probably not though. But this would be a low rider, meaning a lower latitude trajectory here, meaning it would likely track farther to the west. And even here into the far eastern Caribbean, GFS does show something trying to get going there. So as we get towards the middle of August, it may be a little more favorable environment for other systems to develop, along with what may be Invest 97L behind 96L right now. Let's look at the European model. Same sort of thing here. We've got the development here, moving it on off towards the north and west. Weaker, though. Same thing, curving on out to sea. But then here comes the next wave right behind it. A little bit higher latitude on the European model here. And it does, in the last couple frames, as we go 9 days out from now, start to turn it to the northwest and recurve it out to sea, meaning that overall it's sensing that that gap between areas of high pressure, the weakness, the trough developing out in the middle of the Atlantic, will tug it to the north and maybe keep that one out to sea as well. A lot of time to watch it between now and then. All right, out in the eastern Pacific, 2 named storms out there currently. We've got Henriette and we've got Evo that recently developed. That's a little bit closer to land, right off the Pacific coast of Mexico. We'll start with Henriette, though. Medium range tropical storm, 50-mile-per-hour winds. This one's interesting to watch because it's going to be passing by to the northeast of Hawaii here as we get to later parts of the week and getting a little bit stronger. It looks like it's going to gain 60-mile-per-hour, maybe even 70-mile-per-hour winds, high-end tropical storm, as it's just north of Hawaii by this weekend. Now we've got Evo, barely a tropical storm at the moment, but it's now forecast to become a hurricane, be the 5th hurricane of the Eastern Pacific season so far. It'll be brief, though, because it's going to be building into some colder ocean waters and rapidly weakening, as we've seen so many storms out in this general part of the Eastern Pacific do so far this season. So it's got a small window that it can intensify in, like we've seen in other storms, like Eric and Flossie becoming majors. They can intensify quite fast in that part of the ocean with very warm waters. Henriette, and then we've got Evo, and then up next would be Juliet and Kiko, if we see anything develop going forward. Nothing out there right now that looks to be those next names. All right, yesterday's question: in what month have the most Category 5 hurricanes formed? July, August, September, or October? Yeah, peak of the season's in September. Most favorable conditions in the Atlantic basin, so it's in September. Let's go through a brief history. Since 1924, there have been 42 Cat 5 hurricanes in the Atlantic. Doesn't seem like very much for 100 years, right? Category 5, 157-mile-per-hour winds or greater. 25 of them have been in September. And look at the breakdown here. We even had a Category 5 in November, 2 of them in July, 8 in August. But look at the drop, 25 to 8. So September certainly holds that #1 spot. And let's look at those September major hurricanes here. All 42 of them. Oh, excuse me, 25 in September. My bad. Some notables here in recent history: Irma, Maria, both 2017. Those were beasts. And then Dorian in 2019. That one was also, remember that? Dorian sat over the Bahamas, just sat there as a Cat 5 for like 2 days, I think it was, and kind of stalked the east coast of Florida and then moved north. We actually had to deal with that here in the Outer Banks of North Carolina back in 2019. But a lot of impacts from those. And a lot of those were those low riders tracking through the Caribbean and then emerging into the Gulf. Interesting to see there on the map, though. All right, today's question: what was the strongest hurricane to make landfall in the U.S., but we're going to base it on just central pressure? What was the lowest pressure of a storm that made landfall in the U.S.? Was it Andrew in southeast Florida in '92, Katrina, New Orleans in 2005, Michael in Florida 2018, or the Florida Keys hurricane back in 1935? This was over Key West. What do you think it is? I'll have the answer for you tomorrow night on HHL. In the meantime, scan the QR code to download the 13 News Now Hurricane Guide. It is information on supplies you should have on hand, emergency numbers you might need, and a whole lot more. Another reminder, we're here Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. on 13 News Now Plus. And, of course, the recording is for you on YouTube each night as well. We'll see you back here for Thursday at 8 p.m.